Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. We've been talking about books, we've been talking about TV shows, we've even been talking about video games. But today we go back to where it all began for both Star Wars and this podcast because we are finishing out our review of all the movies in the Skywalker saga. Today we're talking about the Rise of Skywalker. All that and more with myself, Paul Hoppy, and Ashley Coffin after this commercial break that the Emperor has probably come back from the dead to control what ads you listen to.
But we have absolutely no control over.
Welcome back. My name is Matthew, your host. One of my two guests today I'm really excited about because she was a regular part of Star Wars stuff for a while, especially when we were talking about some of the movies and Mandalorian. Animated, not her bag, so we've not had her on for a while, but I'm so glad to bring back Ashley Coffin. Ashley, how are you feeling today? How are you feeling about the movie we're watching?
I've got some thoughts about the movie, but I'm really glad to be back here.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the three of us have always had a great dynamic in terms of the different perspectives we bring. Obviously, our third musketeer is Paul Hoppy. Paul, how are we doing tonight?
I think of myself as more of a D'Artagnan, but yeah.
That is still one of the musketeers. Oh, yeah, no, he's the fourth. Okay, that's fair.
Right. No, I'm very happy to be back here
right.
with the two of you. I perhaps am only on here with the two of you because it's with the two of you. Not that there isn't anyone else that I would be happy to discuss it with, but I actually subjected myself to this movie for I think third time now. And actually I have a lot to say, as I know is shocking to everyone, but
No.
Only some of it's bad. So, you know.
Fair.
Yay.
Well, and I'm looking forward to that because I think I am on record as not being the biggest fan of this movie. And I'll probably get into some reasons why. But I think in talking with you both, I've come to have at least a better understanding of what it is that other people like about it, and a framework that I can use to help me at least appreciate parts of it. God, that sounds like no.
I think that's fair.
I'm not even going to pretend. So, and let's just start there. So, kind of your general thoughts on the movie. Ash, why don't you go first?
So it's hard because there are a lot of things about these three movies that I do enjoy, but part of it might just be like I'm so shallow and I just really like Adam Driver, so I might gaslight myself that I just enjoy these movies because that's what I was feeling when I was watching this. I'm like, I don't care about anything else going on in this damn movie except for like the main plot here. Like when they're on the other planets and they're trying to make all these other storylines and then it's just like, all right, just focus on what's happening and we're going to get to the end of the movie. And I don't know. There's just so many little things that mess up trying to stay like on track with what's happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally tracks. Paul, what about yourself? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. But in the end, I enjoy lightsabers and TIE fighters, and it's pretty easy to get me to watch these movies over and over again.
Yeah, for me, it's like the intro is very cool looking, like there's like, I don't know whether they're TIE fighters or they bombers, but they look very cool. It's very dark and kind of red and black. And then, Kylo Ren fighting all those people that I guess we know nothing about or their motivations, except they're protecting this Wayfinder. We don't know why. But, like, it looks cool. It's a badass lightsaber fight against, I guess, people who don't have lightsabers. So maybe a little less badass. But, and then going to Exegol. Like, it looks cool. I don't know. And the movie doesn't really waste a lot of time kind of getting to the point, It, like, pretty much right off the bat, it sets up the question of, like, who is Rey as the central question, I think. And then also, like, what does Kylo Ren want? Like, what's his deal? Like, what is he doing? And, the Emperor is the mustache twirler to twirl all mustaches. And
again.
Right, exactly. And I feel like bringing the Emperor back makes this very much like a classic Star Wars movie, even if it undermines the original trilogy and a lot of stuff. But for me, like, The Last Jedi already undermined kind of a lot of what I want out of the series. Right. And thus the entire post-quel trilogy feels to me like it's non-canonical to, like, my personal understanding of Star Wars. Like, I understand it is officially part of Disney's canon, right? But, like, I don't care. And as a result, this movie felt a little bit like Iron Fist Season 2, to me,
Ooh.
where the thing that came just before it was, like, so disappointing that my expectations were so low that, like, they were actually greatly exceeded by the following product. And for me, this is just a median Star Wars film. You know, it's kind of a fun adventure. There's some cool lightsaber battles and some stuff that's like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And, you know, for me, it's like, it's better than the prequels. I like it better than The Last Jedi. I don't like it as much as The Force Awakens. And I don't like it as much as the original trilogy. And, like, better than Solo, worse than Rogue One. So it's, like, exactly the median Star Wars film for me.
I agree with that. I like this one better than The Last Jedi, too, I think.
Yeah. And I think that actually helps to set up exactly why we see this movie so differently, because Last Jedi is arguably my favorite movie arguing my favorite Star Wars movie, and probably in my top 5 of all movies all time. You know, and I think that what we're getting at there is probably a big part of who loves this movie and who you know, is like fine with this movie versus who doesn't really like it. Because I think, good or bad, I think it's pretty clear. I think even J.J. Abrams has admitted this. You know, Rian Johnson tried to take the things that were set up in The Force Awakens and take them in one very specific direction. And you can say that he was building off the things that Abrams set up in Force Awakens, or you can say he was changing the things. That's a whole other debate, which is, I think, legit. You can see it both ways. But then J.J. Abrams clearly, like, took a lot of the things that Johnson had set up and was like, nah, we're going to actually pull it back in this other direction. And I hadn't really ever thought about it in quite these concrete terms, but I think that probably, I would bet that that the number of people who loved Last Jedi and also liked this movie is probably fairly small. And the people who hated Last Jedi and thought this was at least fairly decent is also probably higher. Because I do think that there are, like, nowhere in this movie does anyone say a line of dialogue anywhere near as bad as half the lines that are in Attack of the Clones, you know?
Right.
The acting is pretty darn good in most cases. The direction is fine. The action scenes are a lot of fun. I don't think that it's a bad, like, we'll get more into this in a second, but I kind of think, like, if you just watch this movie just on its own as, like, a random space opera adventure, it's a perfectly good movie. For me, it just utterly fails as what I wanted it to be as a Star Wars movie because of how much it is. I feel like it's basically saying, okay, Last Jedi is non-canonical, and so we're now going to go in this totally different direction. But, you know, I think it makes sense that if you have different reactions to Last Jedi, you'd feel very differently.
I totally agree with that. That makes all the sense in the world to me.
Yeah.
In fact, I will say that a little bit of my, like, schadenfreude enjoyment of this movie was that it was kind of like I had been so disappointed by Last Jedi and had expected to be before I even had any idea what it was about. I was just like, have an idea where this movie's going, and I'm not happy with it. Actually, in regards to that specific thing, I didn't even mind it as much, but, like, that I was like, now you know how I feel. Like, feeling like this story just kind of, like, goes in a direction that's like, no, that's not what I want out of this. But at the same time, like, you know, I think it would have been better if one person or a group of people talking together and being very collaborative had come up with, you know, a plan for a trilogy that was supposed to be kind of foundational in terms of, like, bringing the Star Wars saga to a close, or then they're like, well, it's the end of the Skywalker saga, but, like, that wasn't, like, clear, right? Is it the end of the Palpatine saga? Like, you know, it definitely suffers as a trilogy. Like, I don't even regard it as a trilogy. I regard it as 3 movies, 2 of whom were mostly made by one person, and 1 was made by someone else, and there was some conversations involved, but it's definitely not cohesive.
I mean, I definitely, kind of something you were saying at the beginning, I've definitely heard from some people I know who disagreed with me on Last Jedi, or more where you are, and who kind of like this movie, and one literally said to me, you know, look, it's kind of schadenfreude. Like, we had to sit through you all talking about how much, you know, you love this movie that we thought was total garbage, and now we get to watch you be so upset about a bad Star Wars movie. And I was like, okay, that's, as long as it's being shared, like, unfortunately, obviously, I think, you know, you have to name the combination of these 2 movies and the way people has felt about it has really brought up so much toxicity in the fandom, and
absolutely,
it's part of why I'm glad we can talk about it in these kind of terms. But and so I'm not saying that kind of stuff. But I think when it's good natured between friends, that level of like, yeah, now you get to have your heart broken the way I did with Last Jedi is kind of fair.
I just love that you refuse to let the name of this movie like sit in your head. You're like, the Rise of.
Oh, did I get it wrong again?
No, not yet, which has been pretty awesome. But I was just like, I love, like, of all of them, that one, you're just like, nope, I don't even care to remember the name of this movie.
Yeah, I think I've gotten it now, Rise of Skywalker. But you totally freaked me out there because it is 100% possible that I said it as like, Revenge of Skywalker or whatever the hell I've called this movie in the past.
Well, at some point they say something like, and then the Sith will get their revenge or Palpatine will get his revenge. And I'm like, oh, it's like they're making it sound like it's Revenge of the Sith. Wait, but that already happened, right? That was one. Yeah. I can't even get the name of the third movie right most of the time in the prequel episode 3. I'm like, whatever that was called.
Yeah. Lava Planet.
But yeah, I mean, some of the things like that I did like about, well, I don't know, like one of the things that a lot of people very toxically somehow had a problem with the Last Jedi was the introduction of Rose, the character played by Kelly Marie Tran, and there was all sorts of hateful just spew that is absolutely disgusting. And one of the things I like least about Rise of Skywalker is they're just like, there's a line where she's explaining why she's not going to be in the plot, basically. But to me, like, I heard in my head, like, the general asked if I could be written out of the story because they thought there were too many characters in the adventuring party. But, like, it's like in The Last Jedi, I don't know. It, like, in The Force Awakens, I felt like, Rey and Poe and Finn had this dynamic, and each of them had some like kind of energy with each other, right? And then in The Last Jedi, I felt like they really went away from that, and that's one of my critiques of that from sort of a different angle, is like that they maybe have a romance going between a white woman and a black man, and they're like, no, let's separate them. And they have they have Finn off doing something that seems kind of irrelevant to the plot to me, off with Rose, right? And then in this one, then they separate them, and they kind of give Finn like a new friend to also have like a cool dynamic with. And I actually think that Finn kind of has the most dynamics in the movies that I like throughout the trilogy, but they kind of just keep like moving him like along to different people to interact with. And so I feel like we never quite get the depth out of that that I would like to see.
Well, it reads just like abandoned storylines and plots and romances, things that they were setting up. And then they're just like, you know what? Never mind.
That
maybe they won't notice. Let's just give him a different girlfriend.
Yeah.
But
right, exactly.
We noticed, like, what's happening.
And I think that's funny because I feel like, I absolutely can't stand what happened to Rosemary Tran. And I've heard different versions of this. I've heard one version of it is that, like, Disney kind of caved to all the toxic fan pressure and were like, maybe let's not have her be a big part. Or I've also heard that, like, the actress was like, look, I don't want to go through that again. Let me just have a small part reminding them there. And either way, I think it's awful. And it's the toxic fans having that kind of power, which should never happen. And I don't think it's coincidence, though, that both her character and Finn, the two main people of color, well, two of the three main people of color in this movie, get treated so poorly. And with Finn, it's funny because Finn's storyline is one of my favorite parts of this movie.
Yeah.
Especially because, and I'll admit it, like, even though I love Last Jedi, I think Last Jedi is really where they started to lose who Finn was. Because Finn kind of got to go on this fun journey in Last Jedi with Rose, and I don't mind that scene. I think it's a little heavy-handed, but fine. But they let go of what I thought were the two most interesting parts, what they had set up with Finn. One of which is his being a potential Force user, and the other of which is the story of an ex-Stormtrooper.
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, on the one hand, they kind of tease this whole thing of that he wants to tell Rey that he can use the Force, and, like, I wish that they had either committed to that or not done as much with it. Right. But I do love that we get to see Finn interacting with Stormtroopers who are also leaving, who know about what he did. To me, that was like such a great window into a world that Finn had originally offered us. And like, I'll say it as a positive. I think that is something I really liked in this movie, and it made me realize, like, why didn't Last Jedi pick up on that at all?
Right. Yeah, for sure. That I thought that was something very interesting about Finn, both potentially being Force sensitive and being a former stormtrooper. And they gave him, I guess, the new character of Janna in this, played by Naomi Aki, who's in the 3rd season of Master of None, which is a very interesting. I don't know. I don't want to say too much about it. I'm trying to get you to watch it at some point.
Okay.
But that I've just been recently watching. I was like, oh, she was. But in this movie, I also feel like in Rise of Skywalker, it's like, oh, there are black women in the Star Wars universe.
Oh my god, is she the first like actual named black woman character in?
I think so. I mean, Solo came out first, and Carly Morgenthau was like part black, or whatever you want to say.
She has a part.
She has she's a character. She's a speaking character. Now I can't remember the character's actual name, but
I forgot that she was even in that.
Yeah,
she plays like the same character too.
Oh, I feel like I put that movie in a little jar back in the back of my mind,
right?
to never open again.
we will at some point have to get to that one, and I may just that may just be like Paul and Riki or like some other people I can get on.
Yeah, I didn't hate that movie because I didn't care as much either.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. So what are other, just in kind of some general terms, what other things people either let's start with the positives. What other things people really liked or at least thought were decent about this movie?
I like Paul kind of said, I really enjoy Rey and Kylo Ren's lightsaber fight on the Death Star. I just really like how tired they're getting and winded. I like when the fights look real.
Yeah.
I actually so everybody hates their storyline. I don't know if you want to get into that now or later, but I like it. I like the little romance between them. I think that they kind of set it up since the beginning, so I don't know why people were like, why is this happening? I mean, who cares? Everybody wants a little love. Of course they do. And of course those two are going to fall in love. I don't know. I liked it. I thought that was cute.
Yeah, I think I definitely want to get into that. I want to do just a little bit of kind of overview of like some good things, some bad things, but then that's first on the list of specific topics.
Okay.
Yeah, I enjoyed that lightsaber. One of my favorite parts of the movie is like, I think this whole Force dyad thing is ridiculous and it just comes out of nowhere and whatever. But where she takes the lightsaber and holds it like behind her back, like she's gonna strike Palpatine down, and then he pulls it out from behind him. I'm like, all right, it's worth having some Force dyad nonsense for like that sequence right there. That was awesome.
I like that whole end part. When Palpatine shoots off that like amazing bolt of lightning up and like electrocutes all this. Yeah, I am so there for scenes like that. I remember seeing it in the movie theater, being like, "Ooh, that's cool."
Yeah, I definitely thought the way things looked on Exegol with the fleet, I thought was pretty badass. And
the sounds and stuff, it was really cool.
Yeah, like I hated the whole like all the Sith people chanting just because we didn't ever really get any explanation of like, is that like ghosts or those real people? Like what's happening?
Those were people.
Yeah,
and it was so dark I couldn't tell. Like I just thought it was just bad cinematography. But
well, I think it was a choice. I don't think it was like the cinematographer's error or something.
We're not even going to explain this, so who cares if they see them or not, guys? Let's just keep moving.
I would say that a bad choice.
In the writer's room.
I think a bad choice counts as bad cinematography. But yes, no, it's an important distinction. It wasn't like...
I don't have any... My dad was a cameraman and cinematographer, and I guarantee that's a director's choice. And
okay, that's
maybe
fair
even
too.
Post-production. But
then I'm probably putting the blame on the wrong person. That's fair enough, and I appreciate that clarification. It was a bad choice. It was a mistake somewhere along the line. But what I was getting to was I did think all the stuff with the fleet looked awesome, and the cavalry ride on top of a Star Destroyer makes absolutely no sense. To me, that was like Fast and Furious level of action. Like you have to just utterly check any understanding of physics, any understanding of reality at the door, and let your mind just go, ooh, this looks cool. Because the thing is, it looked cool.
I was like, I guess they're not that high up into space. And are all those horses okay? Or whatever those were. I was like, did they all get off? They all got off.
Right. They weren't in space, right? They were in the atmosphere of the planet of Exegol.
They're hovering above, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so they're above the ground, but they're like not up, there's oxygen, right? It's like in the... Although, okay. I don't know how there's so many planets that are habitable by the same beings, but whatever. Yeah, there were a fair number of things that I really liked. I have a list. I should have organized them that way, but let's see. I really liked the music in the throne room, where not that, Exegol throne room, but on the Death Star, it was very reminiscent of when Luke helps Vader take the mask off.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's that kind of like sad Imperial March, basically, like maybe on a piano or something. So I really enjoyed that. Just, the music in general, I thought, it's pretty much always on.
Haven't we talked about it before? I feel like the music always gaslights me into liking the movie no matter what.
Yeah, for sure. Like,
there's not much I can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you just put that music there, and it just makes you feel things, whether the story really does the work or not. Let's see. I'm looking up, I'm trying to find something that was very specific.
Well, I can do a couple and we can kind of go back and forth.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I think those all track. I agree with you. I thought the lightsaber scene on the Death Star made a lot of sense, even if the like getting to it made no sense. And I think, honestly, I will say I think that I felt they landed what was going to be the hardest challenge of this movie. And it kind of is the thing that also makes me that I feel like they've set the very high bar for Black Panther, which is how do you finish Leia's story with Carrie Fisher having passed away before they could make this movie? And I had a lot of worries and concerns about that because I thought it could be handled very badly. And I think it definitely... There were parts of this movie that I thought didn't make much sense, such as like Force Ghost Han appearing to
right.
But I think that part was supposed to be Leia, and because Carrie Fisher died and they didn't want to just do like Canny Valley stuff, they chose not to, and I respect that choice. And I felt like to me that very much goes in the like. If I compare what this movie did with that challenge versus how some of the Disney Plus shows have faced the pandemic challenge, I feel like this did a better job. I feel like they did the way that story was handled and the way that Carrie Fisher's parts were handled, I was quite pleased with.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. I was very concerned that they were going to go all like Tarkin from Rogue One, and they didn't. And I think that was kind of like the respectful choice. And it's like, look, our movie's not going to make quite as much sense as it could, but like there was a tragedy. There was a real world tragedy. Someone died. Someone very important to the movie died, a beloved person, Carrie Fisher, and you have to make some changes, and I thought they did that in a graceful way.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, is there anything else? I mean, I think there's probably a lot of things, but any other kind of big things either of you wanted to mention of other positive points in the movie?
I like the desert scene. I like when she does the backflip over the...
Oh yeah, that was fun.
I'm here for all
badass.
the action.
Yeah.
There's the plot and the dialogues I have a lot of problem with the way that the movie is written. And I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself, movie? But we'll get there with that. Yeah. But as for the action stuff, like it was beautifully done and it looked good.
Yeah. Like I mean I thought the whole scene of them fighting over the shuttle and then her winding up like instinctually using dark side powers was brilliant. It's hard for me to remember liking that because I so much don't like how they finished that part of her story. But I did think that moment was like, it was just gorgeous to watch. But also I had like, my heart was in my throat. I was like, oh my God, is she starting to turn? Like, what's this about?
Yeah.
They sold that well.
I got excited for her to turn and then was super disappointed that it never happened.
Exactly.
Like that's all. When she
100%
used that lightning, I was like, hell yeah, she's the one. Oh, this is how, like, even though people wouldn't want that ending, and I know everyone's so tired of, woman goes evil, guy has redemption and saves the day. I really wanted that in this. I don't know. I really did.
Yeah, we'll get to that when we talk about Rey, because I had similar feelings. I wanted something a little different, but similar. But we'll try to only do this a few minutes, talk about a couple things. But what were some of the things you really didn't like about the movie?
Wait. I got more things I really liked.
He has more positive ones?
I have like an inordinate number of positive things. It's really weird. One small thing that I really liked was Poe, when receiving like control of the rebellion, was like, he wasn't like, I can't do this. At first he was, and then he was like, I can't do this alone. And he went to Finn, and he's like, I need you to help me lead. Let's do this together. And and Finn's like, oh, well, I've got this other thing. Thank you, by the way. I appreciate that. Yeah. And and then they do together. And I feel like in general, it sends just a bunch of really good messages that, like, one, control doesn't always have to be held in the hands of one person. Mm-hmm. And two, when you realize that maybe you don't have all the skills necessary to do a thing, you seek help. You seek help from people you trust and people who have the skills to help you get a thing done. And I just thought that was like a really positive, like, nice moment within the story.
Yeah, I like that, especially because it also, to me, that at least was one thing that honored Last Jedi, because it was showing that, like, Poe had grown from those experiences.
Right.
He had learned what Holdo and Fisher were teaching. What Holdo and Leia, I call her Fisher, but we're teaching.
Right.
A lot of the stuff I'm sure we'll get to as part of the bigger questions. We can get into the good and bad of that. But Paul, was there one or two maybe other positive things you had?
Yeah, I also really enjoy the Rey, Poe, Finn dynamic, and I feel like we could have used more of it, but, it's all right. And I certainly could have used more of it in Last Jedi. That's one of the things that I really enjoyed in The Force Awakens and in the original trilogy. And, in fairness, in the original trilogy, they split up the characters in Empire Strikes Back, right? So it's kind of a tried and true format or whatever. But
I mean, I had a moment in this movie where Poe and Rey introduced themselves, and I was like, how have these characters not met until the third movie of the trilogy? Like, it honestly just never occurred to me that they hadn't, but that made me realize, like, okay, that should have happened a long time ago, because of the dynamic between these three.
Right. I have two other things.
Go for it.
I also really like that there's a spy in the First Order, and that it's a petty thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like, yes, I've had a change of heart, I want to, join your cause. It's like, no, I hate this dude, and I just want to see him suffer.
I really resonated with his character. Like, I liked him a lot. And I thought that's one of my down points is, like, what they did with his character. But I enjoyed him. I enjoyed the comedy in this one a little bit more than they're trying to do, like, the Marvel jokes. I feel like by this one, they figured out the right amount.
Yeah.
Sans some horribly given lines. But other than that.
I think that's a good point, because I do feel like the original movies had a very different style of humor 40 years ago. But they had a lot of humor in ways that I felt like the prequels did not. And I did like that about this one a lot. And similarly, like, I am not on board with the Kylo Ren is our new hero thing. And I feel like going into that, I was already so like, I don't want to see the genocidal murderer be redeemed. And then when Hux was like, I was like, no. If you make Hux another hero, okay, good. He got shot and it's hilarious. Perfect. Like, I was so happy when he was, like, they found out he was a spy and he immediately got shot. And I was like, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Bullet dodged.
I except not.
Well, yeah.
Except, I guess not a bullet, but yeah. Yeah, I didn't really have any feelings about that, but I liked the healing of the serpent too, like when Rey heals the serpent, because there's just so much in Star Wars that I'm always on them about, like, there's always these giant animals and they're always killing them or they're always against humans and whatever. And like here it was like, yeah, if you have this force power where, you can communicate in a way beyond words and you have the power to heal and stuff like that, like, yeah, use it,
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that. And I feel like it also has a positive message. And then the last thing that really stuck out to me was the little droid, Dio, I think.
Oh yeah, he was cute.
But like not so much just like being cute, but like didn't want to be touched, had some
right.
trust issues, but was like, no, no, thank you. And then like people wouldn't touch him, like people, it was like there was this very just little message about consent, I think.
Yeah.
That often gets kind of ignored. That like, yeah, if someone doesn't want to be touched, like just don't touch them. It doesn't have to be like a big thing, like, and that, that's juxtaposed a little bit with murdering C-3PO, but
yeah, I have questions about all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to get into that for sure. But
Yeah.
No, that was... So, okay. So what are some of the few things people didn't like?
Oh, where to start? Let's start with C-3PO. So why would Luke, maybe you guys can answer, why would Luke put that in there that he couldn't read Sith? What does that help? The plot?
I was guessing that he was programmed that way before. That wasn't Luke doing that.
Yeah, the way that I interpreted that, and I think, though, that you have to do, like, 3 different headcanon flips to get here, is that, because they've never explained how is it that Anakin, all on his own, built a style of droid that exists. Like, he didn't create a new thing, he built a protocol droid. And that there's many other protocol droids. And so the idea that I kind of got was that he, like, Anakin didn't write a whole new set of software. You can download or you can buy or steal, like, Protocol Droid Software 3.0. Right. And the Republic had written that into the Protocol Droid software hundreds of years ago, or whatever it was. Protocol Droids can't read Sith. But again, like, I feel like that to me is the way it would make sense. But
do they look all possessed when they do? Did they program that in there?
Right, yeah, turn their eyes red.
It was definitely not a strong point.
Yeah.
I think for me, my overall problem, and we'll get into all of them specifically, my overall problems is with how much it doesn't line up with the stuff that had been established in canon already. And part of that is the stuff specific to Last Jedi, which I can kind of let go of, because I know a lot of other people don't like that. But even beyond that, I mean, for me, this was always the saga of Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader. And there's always a problem with both especially with prequels, but sometimes also with postquels, with sequels, where they start to change the meaning of things. And for me, the reason why Darth Vader's story is so important is because he is the one who both makes Palpatine possible, and in the end is the one who ends Palpatine. And so for me, for Palpatine to just be like, oh, nope, it's like a horror movie where you think our hero killed them, but actually our hero made the great sacrifice, tried to kill the baddie, but they're back and they have to be killed one more time, which is a trope in horror movies that I despise. It felt like that, but even just in a more like, because now it isn't even an FU to Last Jedi, it just felt like an FU to the entire Star Wars saga. And I know you can headcanon it in ways and stuff like that, and it wasn't just that. There was a lot of other things that felt like they were such a break, that it just felt, that's to me where it really felt like, it's not even just that it's not canon, it's just that it's like, it's so actively changing what has been established canon, not in the last movie, but in the last 8 movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't like a movie where I have to keep telling myself, don't think about it too hard or you're not going to enjoy this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would back it up and say, like, the plot is obviously preposterous.
Yeah.
Like, all the stuff with the dagger leading to this, and then it looks like something floating in the water, like, years later than when like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. It
was,
there's
and
a lot that doesn't.
There's a lot of that. And I think the movie's too long and it drags to some extent. Not a ton, but like you could have chopped out 20 minutes of maybe some of the fetch quest stuff and like it would have been a little tighter, And one thing I respect about the early Star Wars movies is they're epic, but they're not long. They don't drag. That's one thing I like about the first Avenger movie, And then over time, I think studios and producers and whatever, like, oh, well, let's just add a little bit more. We need to make it a little more complicated. It's like, well, but do ya?
Yeah.
But to your point, Matthew, like, yeah, for me, this movie works because it's non-canonical in my mind. Like, the entire sequel trilogy just doesn't work for me, with the original trilogy and then, you know, Mandalorian now,
Mm-hmm.
that's like where my timeline in Star Wars is up to. And so I can look at this trilogy and be like, well, you know, I don't really like Last Jedi, or I really don't like it, but I enjoy The Force Awakens and I enjoy Rise of Skywalker. But I mean, you're absolutely right that it just kind of like undermines and makes, you know, Anakin's story like kind of like, okay, well, I guess I mean, and you know, whatever, it's a prophecy, like it doesn't have to be true, right? But like, yeah, there was like, the circle was now complete, right? Like, Anakin became Vader and made the Emperor to the point where the Emperor could be the Emperor, and then he destroyed the Emperor, and then became Anakin again, and then died. With some nice little music on the piano, you know. Maybe it's xylophone, glockenspiel. I don't know. I think it's piano.
Yeah. No, I think that really speaks to it. And I think for me, the other thing I really didn't like, and this is kind of a lead into the Rey conversation, but Paul, you can also talk about any other things you want to mention that you didn't like. Obviously, the Rey, in some ways, like, Finn has been an absolute pinball of a character and wound up, like, never really getting the story development he deserved. Mm-hmm. Rey was kind of the opposite, in that she got one story developed quite well, and then turned in an entirely different direction, and that story developed quite well, and then turned in an entirely different direction again, and that story, and I think, to me, her storyline also really bothered me, because, Ashley, very much kind of what you were talking about, I loved the idea that maybe she was going to go to the dark side, or, actually the thing that I was most interested in, and they're kind of teasing this in a lot of the Star Wars media in the last couple of years, Last Jedi has certainly done it, but some other things as well, that maybe, like, this was the real bringing balance, because she was going to kind of say, like, hey, Jedi and Sith are a ridiculous binary, and there's all this room in between. And maybe I can feel anger and feel fear and use those dark emotions to allow me to have power like lightning that I can use to help do good in the world. And that maybe it's possible to have that kind of a balance. And and so for me, I really loved that part, and they kind of just got away with it entirely. And the other thing is, and this has been debated to death, and so we don't need to debate it again, but I just kind of want to say it. When Rey was from nowhere, like, my father isn't some, like, my father is a really awesome guy, but, like, my father isn't a king. My father isn't a, like, there's no, like, great lineage that I'm a part of. And so watching the story of Luke, who is the chosen one, who has this lineage, like, I can't ever relate to that. Mm-hmm. I can relate to Rey. I can relate to the person who's from nowhere, who's not related to anybody, who just is a person who can do great things. Like, not that I can do great things, but you know what I mean? Like, and the connection of that with, like, that one scene at the very end of Last Jedi where the boy kind of uses the Force to move the broom. It was such a beautiful statement of, yes, you can be part of a great family and become a Force user, but you don't have to be. And so then to just, like, piss all over that and say, no, actually she is a Palpatine. It just took something that I so loved from Last Jedi, but also from all these movies, and just threw it up in smoke. And that I think made me angry more than anything else.
That's where I'm bathing in schadenfreude.
It's fair. It's fair.
You know, I mean, the idea of, like, so first of all, I totally agree with your underlying premise of, like, complaint about just, it's like, too much fiction is about royals, you know, or people with this or that lineage or whatever. Like, I don't care. I don't care what someone's lineage is. Like, but I don't not relate to someone because they have some particular lineage. Like, it's just kind of irrelevant to me in terms of, like, sense of identity. Like, my parents are my parents, and, like, my experience was my experience, but them, like, you know, being this or that, like, it is kind of irrelevant to me in terms of, like, the way I see myself. So I never felt like I couldn't relate to Luke because his dad was Darth Vader. Like, that that never felt like an impediment to me.
I walk through life seeing myself as royalty, so that's not a problem for me at all.
Exactly.
I mean, Queen of Philadelphia is a title that has been given and is appropriate. And I think, Paul, you make a good...
my God, my gutter throne.
Yeah. Paul, I think you make a good point. I think for me, it's, in some way, what they did with Rey made it harder. In that, as well as some of the stuff in the Clone Wars and things like that, because of, in the original movies, yes, Luke is part of this lineage, but it's never indicated that like Obi-Wan was part of a lineage or that any of the other Jedis were part of a lineage. So like,
right.
But this now it really starts to feel like like a normal person can't become a powerful Force user, and I guess that's maybe the better way to put it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I don't like that. I think anybody should be, like, I think the idea even that a person is, like, born with Force sensitivity or this talent or whatever, I don't like that. Like, I like the idea that maybe anybody could become a powerful Force user. It's just about learning to do it, right? It's about the experience of listening to the Force and being sensitive to it as an action, not as, like, a, like, genetic characteristic. But I will say that, it, like, in The Last Jedi, like, Kylo Ren told her who her parents were or weren't. And I was like, you can't trust that guy. Like,
he never lied to her, Paul.
Yeah, I feel like the movie established that. I felt like the movie had established that whatever else he was doing, he was being honest with her.
But, like, why would he know? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
Also, as sort of one of the things where I was saying in one of your streams on Twitch, the Ethical Panda, where you were talking about how, how the extent to which The Last Jedi may or may not have contradicted itself, the idea that, in a future movie that certainly could have been addressed, right? Like sometimes you want to leave something unresolved and have some conflict at the end of a, penultimate chapter in a series. In the same way, I feel like, we don't necessarily know at the end of Last Jedi what Kylo Ren really wants. Like, is he really being honest? Is he not? And so I think a lot of things were hanging, and they got answered in this, or didn't, in ways that people liked, or didn't.
Yeah. Or did not.
I think because of it being Kylo, I think where it really loses me is that Kylo Ren is the one to tell her, actually, this is who your family is. Oh, right. And if it had been like, if Palpatine had told her, and she was like, but Kylo said, and he's like, Kylo's an idiot. Of course he believed that. Like,
right. What does he know? I like that. I accept that improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm sure we've gotten to a couple of them, but Paul, is there any other things on your list of, like, we're not going to dive deep into it, but here's just something I really didn't like?
Yeah, like, how did Luke not find the Wayfinder? Yeah. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And, like, it was he'd been there. Like what? I thought 3PO not translating the Sith was, like, the worst. And that was just one of these, like, they just got an extra, 30 minutes out of that. And, like, maybe they could have done without that. And instead of that, they could have had Finn have an actual conversation with Rey about being Force sensitive. I don't know.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
I really didn't like Rose being written out of the story, but I did watch Raya and the Last Dragon, with Kelly Marie Tran as the lead, and I think she does a great job in that. People should check it out. I always like to plug things of actors.
Which, by the way, I'll give a quick plug. The Animation Deliberation, the folks who are often on this podcast talking about Star Wars, they're doing an episode about that, including, and that they'll have a guest who is Filipino and has a real knowledge of that the story world that Reyes story comes from. So definitely check that out. Cool. I don't know if it's out yet, but great. Check it out at some point. Keep going.
I will. Yeah, and I guess that's most of it. Yeah.
I got one. Maybe you guys can explain it to me.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
What the hell is this whole power of two heels one? Like, did they make all that up just for this movie?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I think so.
Because I was like, wait a minute, what is this? And I feel like that is the scene that really takes me out of it. Because they just did whatever that thing you said where she handed the Force what? When she handed the lightsaber to him?
Oh, yeah, the Force dyad. The Force dyad. Is just,
then they both get there and they post up with the two lightsabers and you're like, hell yeah, this is going to be great. And then he immediately, like, owns them and then starts, I'll swallow your soul. And I'm like, what is happening? Why is this doing that? And they're just like, look, don't, they're like, look over here, lightning.
Right. Yeah. You're like, why did they stop looking cool and being badass?
Yeah, like what?
It is something I talked about before that I often don't like in either action or horror movies, where like our heroes come up with some really awesome plan and it looks great, but then it doesn't work and then they have to do something else to win. It's just like, sometimes let like the cool plan work, you know? Like,
yeah,
that would be kind of awesome.
Yeah, just like do it right in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one other little. This is like a small complaint, but like where Kylo Ren like drops the head of, I guess, the some non-human, but of
right.
that I guess they'd gotten the news from the spy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like they would never do that with a human head.
Oh, never in a million years.
So it's like it just feels very speciesist to me.
Yeah.
And
even in that scene, now that you're mentioning it, the way that he's like, "Oh, General Huck, I see that you have a problem with my appearance." I'm like, why would you're in a board meeting? You just threw somebody's head on the table. Really?
Yeah.
Kylo Ren, you're gonna be that damn petty?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly don't feel like Hux is wrong for wanting to stop this guy, you know?
Yeah.
Just also to go back to actually what you said, I will say, from what we know on screen, all the stuff about the Force dyads is completely, first time it's ever appeared. First time it's ever appeared in anything that is now known as canonical.
Okay.
There are a lot of things. This movie, I think, starting also with like some of the newer shows, but also sometimes the Clone Wars, but especially like in more recent years, there's a lot of things that are appearing on screen that are, if not directly taken out of the Legends novels, are clearly deeply inspired by the Legends novels. And so the whole idea of like, I think Exegol is a planet that exists in the Legacy novels. I think it is. I know the whole idea of like the holocrons and like the Wayfinders and stuff. Mm-hmm. That stuff has also appeared in some of the animated shows, but it also comes right from a lot of the novels. So it's entirely possible that this Force dyad came up in some novel, because there's literally been more than I think there's like 200 or something like that.
Yeah.
He specifically says like this hasn't happened in a generation, and I was just wondering if there was a story about that.
Yeah, there may well be in the non-canon novels.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And listeners, if there is, please let us know, because it would be kind of awesome if that wasn't just totally made up. But certainly in terms of on-screen stuff, we've never heard that before.
For sure. We're looking at you, Brian Klein.
Yeah. So let's now get into some of the specific things, and let's just start with Rey. Ash, you started to kind of get into your thoughts on this. Talk to us about like your feelings on Rey's journey. Well, we'll do Rey first, and then Kylo, and then the Kylo Rey of it all, but the Reylo of it all. But I'm sure all three of those conversations will get very mixed up. So you have the floor, Rey.
Okay.
Go.
It's kind of hard to say. Well, I guess they kind of. Her story gets tied up in a really sloppy bow at the end. It's kind of like, oh, we're going to give fan service. We're going to do what everybody wants. I honestly think it would have been more powerful if she A, turned, or B, if she had died. And like he wasn't able to bring her back. Ben wasn't. Mm-hmm. I think it just would have been a lot more impactful, especially for what they do in the last 5 minutes of this movie, which to me that really doesn't make sense. I really don't like the last 5 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
Because I think it just kind of negates like she's done all this stuff, gone through all this thing, made all these friendships. And I mean, it just kind of looked like they left her like, well, you live alone in the desert now. It's kind of sad.
Oh, I felt like at the end she was just going back to like where Luke grew up, kind of like to honor him and Leia and like leave their lightsabers there. I didn't really get the feeling that she's like necessarily just totally on her own there.
Right.
But I feel what you're saying about like maybe her being around like the people that were important to her. It's weird because it reminds me of the scene with Luke and Vader mm-hmm. at the end of Return of the Jedi, where there's this kind of closing, Luke is alone, but it's not the closing moment, then he shows up to the big party or whatever.
Right.
And I think inverting the sequence of those kind of scenes in terms of what they do, I see how it can kind of leave you with this feeling that, like, when you say the last 5 minutes, you mean specifically when she's off there on Tatooine, right?
Oh, see, I read that as she was, like, moving in. Like, that was her new place. Like, I don't know why. I thought, like, I guess... Okay. It looked like she created her lightsaber there, maybe, mm-hmm. and then that lady's like, I'm the new neighbor. Who are you? Moving in here. And then she's like, I'm a Skywalker. And I'm like, what's happening here? Did you just move to Tatooine?
I mean,
to be alone?
Since we established that that much space travel could happen in 16 hours, because really every planet is actually next door to each other when it comes to light speed.
So much.
That means you're never far away from anything. God,
yeah.
They could have just made it a week, or what? Anyway,
right.
Well, I guess if they made her a Skywalker, she got the deed to the estate. So
yeah, I get all that. I definitely feel like there was so much potential for where Rey could go, and I felt like they had to just, in movie one, pick. To me, Rey and Finn are the two basic examples of why the lack of a plan killed these movies. Because I was very unsatisfied by where her character wound up, but to some extent, I don't think there was any way to have an ending for her that would satisfy even half the fans, because she'd been so all over the place. And I think that there's obviously a lot of reasons why I think having her take the villain turn, I think would have been difficult. I would have not been okay with her becoming the villain and Kylo Ren become the hero. To me, I mean, he's a genocidal maniac. Like I can't have him be redeemed because of one good kiss.
But it's Adam Driver.
Well, fair enough. Also true. But like,
I think Adam Driver's funny looking. I think I'm like the only person on Earth. But anyway.
I think that's what I like about him.
Oh, okay.
There's
right,
he's just got this tall goofiness.
he just has that like emo boy like.
Yeah, and he gets real intense.
He's super powerful. He's super confident, except for that one woman who he'll like break everything down with so she can care for him. Like, I mean, I'm literally quoting like things people have told me about why they find his character so attractive.
Just take my hand. I'll make you my Queen Sith and we'll rule. I was like, what the hell are you doing, Rey?
But I think just going back to her character, I would have loved to see her go all the way dark side. I would have really loved to see her, again, find that balance, because the thing is, she kind of did. Like, she clearly expressed a lot of the dark side emotions over the course of all three movies, but especially this one. And there was never a sign of, like that the moment where she, like, all the Jedi of the past speak to her, which was a great moment. And then she, turns it all on Palpatine and defeats him and becomes the Skywalker and whatever. Again, that last 5 minutes is awful, but even putting all that aside, like, she never had the moment of like, yes, I was wrong to kind of give in to my fear. I was wrong to give in to my anger. I see that now. She lived those feelings, and it was okay. And I'm going to get a little more meta here, so if you haven't seen other Star Wars properties, feel free to skip forward about 5 or 10 minutes. I think one of the things that's so interesting is that there's a number of Star Wars properties now where the best Force users are people who didn't grow up in the temple, didn't get to learn from an early age to shut down all of their emotions. Like Kanan Jarrus in Rebels has lots of emotions. He's in love with a woman. He has a romantic partner. It's not just an unrequited love. They're romantic partners. They have a kid by the end of one of the shows. Grogu, he's a toddler, but he's got all kinds of emotions. It's not a problem. There's people in some of the novels who are doing that, in some of the video games. I just thought there was something, it feels like they're all sort of leaning into this idea of, we're setting it up for someone to say on screen, yes, the Jedi were wrong to totally shut down emotions. You can be a Force user for good and feel the emotions. But they're never quite willing to say that, and they, in this, like, especially with like the different color lightsabers, like they gave all these hints that she was doing things in a new way, but they never actually said what that was. And that just left me so unsatisfied.
That is frustrating. It would have been nice to see like her take the turn, and instead of it being Ben that saves her, like Poe and Finn, like bringing their friendship like full circle, being able to talk her out of it or talk her down, or I don't know. It's a lot of missed opportunity.
Definitely.
Yeah, I could see something like that. I didn't mind her arc. I don't mind. I actually like the last 5 minutes, even though I think it's more like 2 or 3 minutes. But like the final sequence, it works for me. It's to me, it's kind of her deciding that she is who she wants to be. That it's not her parentage that defines her. That it's her. That her mentors that she chose. Right? She chose to study with them. It wasn't like forced upon her like it was Jedi Padawans in the days of yore. Like, she was like, no, train me. And so she chose her own name, and I respect that. I like that as a story. I think to your point, Matthew, I love that. And Ashley, I mean, in terms of like turning to the dark side, I think that would be very interesting. Honestly, when I saw the previews for The Last Jedi, I was like, oh, is Luke going to be the villain? Like, I thought that would have been a really interesting story. I'm not sure whether I would have really liked it in terms of how it fit with canon or whatever, but like, I think that could be an interesting story. I think Rey turning to the dark side could be an interesting story, but I think the rejection of the idea that there has to be this light side, dark side, and like you pick one, and you can only use certain powers if you're on the light side, like, I would love that.
Yeah.
I think the Jedi idea of like, reach out with your feelings, but don't have any of them.
Problem.
Yeah.
Like
Jedi stuff, it sucks. Being a Jedi sucks.
Yeah, and like it's you can either redefine what it means to be a Jedi, or you can say, you know what, I'm not going to be a Jedi. I'm going to be a Force user. And I'm going to be a Force user who cares about other people and tries to help them instead of just being, trying to amass power for myself all the time.
That reminds me, actually, Ahsoka was another one of those. Like, she's clearly acting out of emotion. She's not a Jedi, but she's also not a dark side user.
Exactly.
Do they have a word for that?
No, I mean, sometimes they call some people Gray Jedi, but I think that's more of a specific something else.
Yeah, the Gray Jedi is a term that comes also from the Legends books. I don't think it's ever appeared in actual canon. In the actual canon, there's been some references to people, like, leaving the Jedi Order, but still following the Jedi Code, but it kind of being like you're on sabbatical from it, so it's not really fully followed. It's never really been explored in a kind of satisfying way outside of the Legends books. Go ahead.
I just wanted to also say that, like, I'm fine with the redemption arc for Kylo. I didn't. I'm really not here for the Kylo romance.
Oh my god!
Like, it just. I just, it's like at the end. It's funny, I think in the novelization, like, they refer to their kiss at the end. They're like, but it's totally platonic, which is like, okay. But, like, I don't know. I just didn't like that they went so much into that direction, and particularly starting with The Last Jedi. But then here they continued that and kind of left, I think her relationship with Finn is very interesting and is potentially very interesting. And as it is, it's like, it's just potential, because it's never clear exactly what's going on between the two of them, and it's never explicit that, like, I mean, like, in my head canon, like, Finn is Force sensitive and can become a Jedi, and so after this story, he probably is like, oh yeah, by the way, like, I could feel these things, and like, maybe train me. And she's like, oh wow, okay, you'll be my first, apprentice or whatever. And like, we'll see how that goes. Often it doesn't seem to go that well for like these Force users, but I would have liked more of that.
Yeah.
But there were some moments in terms of the kind of like, I think up until the point where they're kissing, like, it's not clearly romantic, their connection.
Yeah. Like,
just because one's male and the other's female doesn't mean, and like, they're both good looking to a lot of people, like, doesn't mean like it has to be a romance. It's like,
I think they set it up in The Last Jedi, like, when they touch hands and stuff like that, like, it's a little romantic.
I think
I only saw The Last Jedi once, so I'm not going to totally disagree with that.
I think it definitely could be romantic, but I think it also could be read as more as like, we're sharing this incredibly intense experience.
I don't know. I get like sexual tension off them especially in this movie when they're all angry at each other. Like, I'm like, they're going to throw those lightsabers down and just go at it on the Death Star. Oh no, she just stabbed him. Never mind. Read the room wrong.
Like, I don't get that from that scene. I get more of that from like Poe and Finn just having a conversation.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say, like, I want to say more on Rey, but there's a whole conversation we can have about the romantic relationships that didn't happen. And I think a lot of my frustration about, in some ways, it's like, what if Kylo Ren, okay, fine. I said something about him being redeemed. Like, I am happy for the most part. I didn't like their kiss, but I am happy that he didn't actually get a redemption arc. He got like what Anakin got, which is that he got to die doing one great noble thing, which is important. But I don't think that anyone was like, oh, Anakin, like, you're forgiven for killing all those kids, or Kylo, you're forgiven for, like, helping to blow up all those planets or genocide all these people. Like, he's not he didn't get a redemption arc, which I thought he would have if he'd, like, become the hero.
I mean, I call it a redemption arc and you don't, but, like,
yeah.
I know what you mean as far as the distinction. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and to me, like, you compare that to, like, Zuko or Catra from, like, Airbender and She-Ra. To me,
you could even say Loki, like by Thor Ragnarok, like he's had a longer redemption, but he killed a lot of people.
Yeah, like to me, he hasn't had it. He's on a redemption arc, but I don't think he's there yet. Part of why I think the new show is so interesting, especially because it's backup somewhat.
Part of why I hated Infinity War so much, but proceed.
Also fair. But I think the other part of it with Rey is, well, first of all, I mean, the romantic aspects there it is kind of awesome because that's one more of the, like, hey, maybe you don't have to be, like, celibate in order to be a Jedi, which, again, is not commented on, and I wish it was. But the thing is, one of the things that is, there's like 4 different thoughts that were jumbled up in my head here. Just to respond to Paul, the 2 other things that you said, though, one is what you're saying about why she went back to make herself, to declare herself a Skywalker. I feel like you're doing what I've often done of, like, the movie tells us point A, the movie tells us point B, and you're drawing the headcanon path that connects the 2 of them, because I think that is a logical explanation of why she did it. I don't think the movie tells us that at all. And honestly, I thought it was because she still is not okay with the idea of defining herself as herself. She has to define herself by some powerful lineage, and she doesn't want to be a Palpatine, so she'll be a Skywalker instead. And I just thought that was such a betrayal of her character that I was like, no, that's not... Because you're right, I love the idea of her being homage to all these people, but, like, be yourself. You don't have to be anyone. You are just Rey, and that's okay.
And then it's like, what's the movie title?
That would be a different choice. Is it
her, or is it Kylo Ren? So it's her, right? We're supposed to, like, she's the Rise of Skywalker? Or is it Kylo Ren?
Unclear. He's the one who had to climb up out of that pit, so maybe it's him. But,
yeah, I mean, until he
did rise. Oh, you're right.
Until she said those words, I 100% thought it was him. I thought it was because it's the assertion of, you know, Ben Solo Skywalker. Well, actually, even more so, like, to me, part of what the Skywalker name is, it's not just Luke and Leia, it's also Anakin. And to me, it's kind of like Kylo, who has followed Darth Vader all of his life, is in this last moment literally doing the best thing Anakin ever did, which is when Anakin rejected Darth Vader. And so it's him kind of like claiming on to the Skywalker Solo name of it while rejecting, like, the worst parts of Anakin, but basically repeating the best thing that Anakin ever did.
Yeah, and earlier in the movie and in the previous movie, there's a parallel to the, you know, the Vader and Luke thing in Empire, where, you know, Vader's like, come with me and together we'll destroy the Emperor. And that's what Kylo wants too. He's like, you know, he's like, join me and we will destroy the Emperor. And then they do. Which also is the plot of Return of the Jedi, even if it wasn't totally the plan. But it's like, it is this very strong parallel. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. You know, but at no point did I think Luke and Vader were going to bang. So, I don't know.
There was already the incestuous kiss. We weren't going to double down on that.
Right. We already had to worry about Luke and Leia. How
much incest do we need? Yeah.
Well, okay, so, and we can go back to Kylo and Rey and all of it if we want, but let's just talk about romance for a second, because it felt to me like, I totally agree with you, Paul, that I feel like Force Awakens teased, maybe you could say 3 relationships, but certainly 2 I felt got teased very hard. One of which is Finn and Rey, and the other which is is Finn and Poe. And I felt like that. I don't know if they never intended to go to those dynamics, or if JJ wanted to, but the studio didn't, or even maybe if, and like, you know, I keep saying how much I love Rian Johnson. It's entirely possible that Rian Johnson was the coward on this, and he didn't want either the male-male relationship or the interracial relationship, or what the entire polyamorous world has been screaming for, like make them a triad ever since that first movie came out. That's my headcanon. The three of them are together.
Sure.
But I just felt like by the end of it, like, you know, they literally gave Finn two different romantic connections in the second movie, both women of color, just to be like, no, don't worry, he's not going to fall in love with a white girl. Like, and then also to be like, nope, but look, in some ways to me, like, if Finn and Poe never really get together, but Poe is just canonically queer, like, I'd love that. Having, like, an ex from Poe's past show up, just to kind of be like, look, he likes girls. It felt so unnecessary and so, like, kind of offensive, honestly. Like, we don't need this. You can leave
character.
You can leave the character's sexuality completely open. It's fine, or define it one way or the other. But throwing in this completely useless character just to, like, be like, look, he has a past dating women. It just everything about the romance. I think it's part of why I'm like, if we're gonna have any romance, really, it's like the Jedi and the genocidal maniac. I keep calling him that, but you know, like, that was the one kiss I didn't want to see of all the kisses it could have been.
I have to disagree with that.
Sure.
Have at it.
No, with the kiss thing. I agree with the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
I just think, I don't know why. I mean, I know why. Imagine if they had done that. We weren't even, like, where we are now with how people are more open with gender, you know, sexuality and stuff like that. Think about how toxic it was for Rose. Imagine the Star Wars community heads just blowing up. And it's a shame. Like, I feel like we're getting closer.
Yeah.
What did you think about that kiss they had in there with the two ladies? They were like, look, we did it. I thought that was just... I didn't like. I like that they were doing it on screen and in a Disney movie, but it's like that. It seemed like the team up thing in Endgame.
That was exactly where my mind went.
Sorry, I could not get to where I was trying to get in my head there to say that. I'm sorry.
I was going to make the same joke. I was going to say something about how Disney Plus has clearly started like a sweepstakes to see which of their major franchises can be more pandering without any actual, like, effect. And, like, I don't know if it's, you know, the guy in the support group meeting talking about his male partner, or the kiss between the two women. Like, it's fine. In some ways, I feel like if you hadn't done so much to, like, try to erase the Poe possibilities, I would have liked that a lot more. But instead, it very clearly felt to me like, we're not going to give you Poe, but don't worry, we're not homophobic, we're giving you this instead.
And then it's like, Paul, what you were saying, they wasted 25 minutes of our time with this Zori storyline, which none of that makes any sense. Why wouldn't she go with him? Why would she suddenly give him that special little locket or whatever the hell that was that gets him in and out of anywhere? Like, there was just, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Like, if ever there was a female character created solely to be a plot point for a male without, like, any characterization of her own, that's her.
Mm-hmm. And then to pretentiously not have them get together, I'm like, what is happening?
I actually didn't mind that one aspect of it. Overall, I'm with you both on everything you just said. Where, I mean, the kiss between the two women at the end is like, it feels like it's like they're trying to be like, no, see? And it's like...
Yeah, see?
You know, if you have a bunch of movies with significant queer relationships, and then you have that in a movie that just doesn't happen to have any, you know, romances or between any of the main characters, like, I think that would be a positive addition, sort of like, you know, in Birds of Prey, like, there's some kind of throwaway, you know, just like, oh yeah, by the way, you know, Harley had an ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, she's telling the story of her young years, and she says, and then this guy broke my heart, and then this girl broke my heart, and there's nothing else is said. But it just clearly establishes that and then moves on.
And like, that's not a story that has a bunch of, you know, romances in it. But then here it's like, when you set it up so much, but then you don't pay it off, and you're a studio that has just never paid it off in any significant way. I mean, I think, you know, it's like, come on, you know.
It's a space opera. Where is the romance?
Yeah. And it's funny because now in the three main movies, there have been in the three sets of movies, you know, the original series had a romance, Han and Leia, which I thought was great. I mean, the romance of Empire Strikes Back, I think, is very well done. the prequels had a romance that is... I've seen The Room, and the lack of romantic chemistry between the characters in The Room is probably lower than the prequels. But it's... But
What do you mean, Ma?
But A, it's close, and B, in The Room, it's about people killing each other. So, like, take that as you will. And in this one, I sort of felt like they were like, well, we're supposed to have a romance, but we don't know how to have a romance because we screwed it up last time, but we did it well before. So maybe this... They just had no idea what the hell they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it just felt so... none of it felt organic to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and meanwhile there was stuff that felt like it could have been organic to the story.
Yeah.
You know? It's like in The Force Awakens you had so much chemistry, it's like maybe go somewhere with that.
Yeah.
You know? And then they're like, no, we're going to go somewhere else. We're going to do something else. We're just, you know, we're not going to pay any of that off. Like, I'm fine with stories with no romances. I arguably prefer stories with no romances most of the time.
Yeah.
But, like, if you're going to kind of imply maybe a romance, and I feel like Star Wars movies, like, you can use one. And, you know, maybe not with your main character, you know? Maybe do the same thing. Like... You know, the Han Solo character is really more of is Finn, right? Yeah. And the Leia character is Poe. And, like, maybe they get together, just like they did in the original trilogy. And it's like, people can just deal with that. They were mad at The Last Jedi anyway. Yeah. You know? Yeah. It's like...
Double down.
Yeah. I mean, certainly I hate the idea of toxic fans winning. Like, to me, that's such a bad precedent in general. Mm-hmm. Because I certainly saw, like, when Rise of Skywalker came out, I certainly saw from, like, some of those toxic fans, people posting, like, look, this is why we harassed Rose, you know,
right.
Kelly Marie Tran, because it worked. They didn't put her in this new movie. And I was just like, but I'll say, to me, I feel like you could have gone either two ways with Rey and Kylo. I at first wanted nothing to do with it. I did love the dynamic between those two characters. And talking to friends of mine before that movie came out, I was sold on the idea that maybe they could do the romance right if they did it. But it felt to me like the two characters had this intense experience that could lead to romantic things, or it could not. But if it did, you needed to tell that story in a much more explicit way, as well as, like, talk about her with this whole thing of, like, Jedis are not supposed to have these attachments. But instead, what it felt like was they didn't want to tell that story, but they did want the kiss because all the people who wanted to see those two beautiful actors kiss, so they threw in the kiss. Without, like, to me, it felt very much like Rogue One is one of my favorite movies, especially in the Star Wars story, but also just a great movie. And I came very close to hating it in the last couple of minutes. Because I felt like, to me, I feel like what they did with, oh my God, I can't remember her name now. It's something like Jyn. To me, it felt like what they did with Cassian and Jyn was very similar to what they did with Kylo and Rey, in that you had these two characters who are male and female and are both very attractive people, have this very intense situation together, which in a lot of movies, like, it's classic, like, okay, they fall in love, they kiss right before they die, etc. If they had kissed, my enjoyment of Rogue One would have gone way down, honestly. The fact that they kind of hold hands and they're clearly sharing a moment, and you can be like, maybe some romance is developing, maybe it's not, but they both know they're about to die, so that's not really the first thing on their list. Yeah. I loved that. And I feel like that's where, if Kylo and Rey had ended in that kind of place of, yeah, we've been through this incredibly intense thing, and I don't know how we feel about each other, and this is not the time to figure it out because we're dying, or I'm dying and then you're dying. Yeah, that I like that way of ending the story. The kiss just felt so gratuitous and so, well, we want the screenshot of these two people kissing, so let's give them that. Mm-hmm. Now, I've ragged on it a lot. I know you love it, so please feel free to defend it and tell us why we're all wrong.
Hey, I'm shallow. I'm fine with it. I'm not ashamed.
That's legit.
Yeah. I don't know. They were just teasing it the whole time. And then, you know, I was more annoyed and, like, just how it happened. Like, you know, they kiss and then he immediately disappears. It's just like, okay. How is there 25 minutes left in this movie? What's going on?
Yeah. That's
a lot of credits.
All right. So, anything else to say about Kylo or Rey?
There was one quote where where the Emperor says, like, she'll never be a Jedi, or Kylo says it to the Emperor, and I'm like, she's not a Jedi? Like, what? Does somebody not become a Jedi until their trilogy is over? How does that work?
Right? Like, you have to get a special star or something, or
Right.
a paper.
This actually does... go ahead, Ashley.
We, this scene when they're in the Death Star, I do that to Ken all the time whenever I'm asking him for something, like the remote. I'll be like, give it to me. It's just like one of my favorite things to do. And then if he doesn't hear me, I'm like, give it to me.
I like it.
Might be my favorite scene of the movie.
That's awesome.
He has such like a physical reaction to her saying it, and it just makes me laugh out loud.
Yeah.
I will say about that question of like who becomes a Jedi. That's actually the other thing I was going to say about Rey and Luke and things like that. Because Paul, you did point out, like, if Last Jedi is all about rejecting all the problems with the Jedi Order, why does Luke go from saying the Jedi have to die to saying Rey is a Jedi, I will not be the last Jedi?
Mm-hmm.
Which again could say that like she is a Jedi or that she can become a Jedi, but either way how you put that, though I think it's pretty clear like she is a Jedi.
Are you not a Jedi until they talk to you in your head? Until they be with you or whatever?
Well, I think that's the whole point, is that, because the more I thought about it, and again, I wish this had been made explicit at somewhere, Luke and Rey are the only two people who are doing Jedi things that never had anything to do with the Jedi Order. And I'm wondering if maybe kind of what Luke was getting at, and it's kind of like what I'm talking about a lot of the other characters are doing, but Luke didn't know about them, is him kind of realizing like the problems were the Jedi Order and people being raised in the Jedi Order, and that actually all the things Yoda was afraid of, all the reasons why Yoda and Obi-Wan thought that Luke might not be a good Jedi, or mostly Yoda, are the reasons why Luke was a good Jedi, and why the reasons Luke could like survive the temptations that Anakin could not, and that so many other Jedis could not. And so I kind of had and again, this is purely headcanon, but I like the idea that maybe if that's part of why, like, in his mind, Rey can rebuild the Jedi. Because, like, yeah, actually maybe this, like, adult recruitment thing and not stealing kids when they're 3 years old and totally shattering their emotional lives, maybe this is a better plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that really interesting, actually. I mean, I like the idea to kind of come to peace with the you know, kind of what's going on in... Oh, that's my alarm. It's okay. Like, kind of coming to peace with The Last Jedi, or, like, sort of what Luke's trying to say in it anyway, is, like, maybe he doesn't think the Jedi should continue because of what the Jedi were, and then he wasn't able to kind of bring the kids up to, like he didn't do it right? But then Rey shows up, and, like, maybe Rey changes his mind, not by trying to convince him of anything, but just by being her.
Right.
And maybe he has some confidence in her. Which, you know, I mean, my biggest issue with The Last Jedi is just, I feel like Luke's defining moment in Return of the Jedi is his refusal to give up on his father. And so the thing that I hate so much in The Last Jedi, aside from, like, not really wanting to see a story of old Luke dying, is, like, that he gave up on Kylo, or that's how I see it anyway. Mm-hmm. He gave up on Ben, you know, and here, maybe seeing Rey and being like, oh, well, you know, she has this, you know, this darkness in her, right? In terms of, like, she relates to the dark side of the Force, but maybe she can sit with that and not turn, you know, basically, and not end up going the way of Anakin and Ben. And I don't know. It's never mind.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And not to get back into this old debate, but just to say one quick thing, what you said about I've never heard you say quite so succinctly what it is about Luke's story that you don't believe and don't agree with. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that helps me, because it may well be here that our different views of it are so different, in part because of a different understanding. Because I walked away from Last Jedi feeling like the whole point of the 3 different versions of the story is that Luke did not give up on Kylo. He had a moment of weakness, just like he did in Return of the Jedi. that there was the moment in Return of the Jedi where he did let his, anger and his desire to protect his sister and all that cause him to start fighting to kill Vader. But that he was able to kind of pull himself back from that and be like, no, I don't want to kill Vader. I'm here to save him. And to me, that's exactly mirrored by him having that one moment of maybe Kylo has to die and then pulling back again. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that
I still hate it, but I get you. I get you.
So let's go to another thing that I think all three of us probably have pretty strong feelings on. But I know, Paul, I think you put this directly into the outline because I know you've talked about it. Let's talk about C-3PO and how he gets handled in this story.
So badly. like wiping
so
someone's
mean.
mind is killing them, is killing the person that person is. C-3PO was... Yeah,
they didn't even give a shit. They were just
right.
He wakes up and he was like, oh no, right before he's like, I just want to look at my friends one last time. And they don't even say anything.
It's so bad. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's
even down in the worm tunnels, he's like, Poe, or he's like, Finn, Rey. And in the background, he's like, I know you didn't say my name, but I'm okay. I'm like, geez.
Yeah, it's this is something that we've been talking about with you all, with Jacob Leachich, former co-host, whose Twitter name is Bots Are People too. He's very dedicated to the idea of robot rights, and but also with Riki and Sarah Hayashi on the Clone Wars episodes, clone life is never given any seriousness. Even with the the Roger droids, who I can't stand, the number of times that their suffering is played for comic relief is just really uncomfortable. And it's funny, before what you're saying about D.O. and how his sort of desire not to be touched is respected, and he's never mocked for it. Which, compare that to C-3PO's basic levels of, he's paranoid. He has high levels of anxiety. And that's never respected. It's constantly made fun of. It's presented as comedy to the audience. And it's, Han Solo thinks it's hilarious and awful and has no problem, mocking him like crazy, as does Leia, as does everybody else. I think, to me, one of the hardest parts of that is that 3PO in the end does volunteer. He does say, I want to do this. But it also feels to me like no one was ever oh, no, we can't do this unless you... they may play lip service to that, but like you said, they're not treating this like some impossible thing. If that story had been much more about no, we can't possibly do this, we can't do that to 3PO, it's not, and it being about, because he's a person and his rights are important, his life is important, instead of just, oh, but we need him for all his other skills and stuff. I think that scene could have gone very differently, because then it is the guy who sort of who's never really seen as being important to the fight, being willing to make this incredible act of sacrifice to help the victory. That could be a great moment for him. But but instead it's played as his life doesn't really count. Oh, okay, he's going along with it. That's good, but wink, wink, we're going to do it to him anyway.
And then they throw in that line right before they do it when he was like, actually, I have another idea. And then they
and then
do it anyway.
Oh, my God.
I agree with both of you so much. But on the other hand, if Steve Rogers was there, maybe the Emperor would have ended up destroying half the universe.
Oh, God.
Who knows?
Yes.
So,
I mean, that's the thing.
There's a happy medium, though, right?
When the person is willing to volunteer to trade lives, you trade fucking lives.
Yeah, I mean, in both instances, agency was not really respected.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's in Infinity War, because Vision isn't seen as a person. I think Vision is seen as a person much more than 3PO is treated as a person here, but certainly isn't granted, full agency. It's no, we can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's Cap having the classic martyr complex of I need to be a martyr, but I can't allow anyone else to do so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought we were going to have a long conversation about 3PO, but I think there's just a general, it sucked. It was terrible.
No, it's just totally messed up. It's ridiculous. They're oh yeah, we'll just kill one of our members, one of the main members of our party, without really caring what they think about. And, it's sort of I don't know. In the movie, there's this, like, casual destruction of a planet, too. Like, we'll just blow up the planet.
Oh.
Like, whatever. And, like, I kind of hate that. Like, the whole, like, the whole thing about blowing up planets is so ridiculous.
Right.
Like, you want to rule what exactly? Like, if you blow up all the planets, there's nothing left to rule. Like,
well, but as you established, there's literally thousands and thousands of planets that all have the perfect living conditions for.
Right, exactly. So I guess no big loss. Yeah. But yeah, I just hated the like, oh yeah, they're just gonna kill 3PO, whatever,
Yeah.
Do they give him his memories back?
Yeah.
By the end? Okay.
Yeah, R2, Deus Ex Machina.
Literally,
Troid. Literally.
Actually, no, I think that's Machina Ex Machina.
Right, Machina Ex Machina. You're right. It's.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and like I'm glad you brought up the Alderaan thing because to me the other part of that is the fact that like an hour or two in their lives later, no, I mean like 1 or 2 days later, Leia is now consoling Luke because he lost his mentor when she lost 4 billion of her fellow people. Like there's so much wrong with all that.
Yeah. It's like, by the way, my entire planet was just blown up.
But let's talk about your feelings.
Yeah. So I think that covers the main kind of topics I wanted to hit on. I guess one other thing is, so there's one last topic I want to get into, which is the Emperor returning. That obviously was the big thing that was teased in the trailers and stuff, and then the opening crawl tells us it's going to happen, and it became the center part of the story. What was your take on how that storyline went down?
I don't understand any of what they were doing in there. I didn't know how he came back. I didn't know who those people were working on him. I didn't know where he got his new army from. I don't know who those people were in the stands. So I don't know. It was just it was a lot of stuff that didn't make sense. But I thought he looked cool, and I thought his powers were cool. But even how he handled the two becomes one thing, none of it made any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a villain in a solo movie or returning in a sequel that doesn't have any relevance to canon in my mind, thought it was fine, and I think he's an enjoyable villain. But on the other hand, it's like that loop was closed. And now we're reopening it. But that's the whole thing that the, sequel trilogy is doing anyway. Is basically being everything that happened, we're just going to just redo that kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
And, maybe have some, some different takes on stuff. But, ultimately.
Not that different.
Not that different. Yeah, but some stuff, the whole, the stuff in The Last Jedi. Which is stuff that, if it didn't have the stuff that I really didn't like, I could have maybe gotten into a lot.
Yeah.
But, this felt like, The Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams was like, so we're going to remake A New Hope. And then The Last Jedi was Rian Johnson being like, okay, we're going to do something totally different. And then this movie was J.J. Abrams being like, okay, we're going to remake Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And I mean,
we really need another Strike Me Down. We couldn't figure out a different way to have this happen.
Right.
And let's also be honest.
Do we believe him?
Oh, yeah.
What if she just struck him down? We don't
So
know
true.
that his spirit would have gone into her. I don't know.
I
was very curious about that.
Yeah.
He could be lying. I don't trust him.
I definitely agree there that it felt so contrived. It felt so pointless. Like I said, I hated that it was undoing everything Anakin had done. And the extent to which it also just they never explained anything about Snoke except Palpatine was sort of behind Snoke, and you saw if you look very carefully in some of the cloning chambers. I had to read this because I certainly never noticed it, and I've seen the movie 4 times now.
Oh, I noticed the Snoke.
Yeah, there's little Snokes in the cloning chambers and things but it's never said. It's
right.
Yeah,
and I think in some ways, I agree with what you're saying, Paul. I think kind of in a meta way, my sense is that the prequels were so badly received. And in fairness, it turns out that young people did really like those movies. And because certainly a lot of people who are now in their late teens, 20s, even sometimes early 30s, who grew up on those movies, in the way that I grew up in the original movies, love them a lot more than I gave credit for. And I'm glad so much content's being created. But obviously, in terms of the overall reception, the prequels were widely rejected. And I get that...
Primarily, though, by the people who had really enjoyed the original trilogy, I think.
Right. But I think, especially because this was pre-internet, that meant most of the critics. And so that was kind of the dominant conversation. Because there wasn't... There weren't people making TikToks about, screw the critics, I love this movie.
Right.
Right.
There were just kids enjoying them.
Right. I mean, Lucas had literally, like, given up on wanting to be part of this anymore because of, like, how much people didn't like his vision. My point being, so I feel like Force Awakens needed to be very, very close to the original material to win back people's trust. I wish it hadn't been quite so close, but yeah, after that, you could have just gone in new ways. And even if this, like, one small thing that probably would have made me like this movie a lot more, and I think could have been basically the same movie, if it was like some other Sith Lord who had been like, you know, his followers on Exegol had come back and, you know, cloned from like his like DNA somewhere and brought back like Darth Bane or like some random Sith Lord from 1,000 years ago.
But wait, who voiced Darth Bane in the Clone Wars?
Who did? I don't know.
It was Mark Hamill.
Oh, that's right. That's awesome.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah, that would have been so good. But yeah, I mean,
oh man, now I'm just angry we didn't get that.
Yeah, because like it didn't have to be Palpatine. It could have been any other Sith Lord who came back, because now they have to face a new threat, and now there's a sense of like, now you can get into the idea of this is cyclical. Like, yes, Palpatine was the worst example of the Sith that anyone's ever seen for 1,000 years, and he's been destroyed. But it's not done. It's not over. Like, there's always going to be dark side users. There's always going to be light side users, and maybe he's not Sith. Like, yeah, you could have gone so many other directions with that. And I thought making it Palpatine both, it erased all the stuff from the past, and it also just, it just like felt like it utterly refused to tie up any of the loose ends that, yes, Johnson had set up. And I think that's, in the end, I don't know if I can blame Johnson or Adams, but I certainly blame their bosses who didn't think they needed an overall plan. Because that just, to me, I'll even say this, that maybe I'm overly harsh on this movie because this movie basically was the train wreck caused by The Force Awakens and Last Jedi going in totally different directions.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, and I think it's the sort of thing where, look, when you make a great movie, it's not one person, right?
Yeah.
We can say, oh, this was this one person's vision or whatever. And that can be true, but like that it was their vision, but it was not their work bringing that vision to life, right? It was the work of literally hundreds of people, maybe thousands when it's movies on this scale. And often even the creative team, it's maybe one person has the driving vision, but a lot of other people will give input and it'll come together. It can come together in a very beautiful way. Similarly, when you have, you know, a disaster, a train wreck, the blame, I think, very rarely is going to fall squarely on one person's shoulders. It's just there was not a successful collaboration, right? And that's because of a bunch of people. And you know, those same people can make great things and make things that are, you know, not so great. And that happens. And here it feels like there were a lot of people involved and they couldn't all get together on the same page. And to what extent that was, you know, the primary people writing the screenplays and to what extent that was executives, I mean, we'll probably never know for sure. But it's like, yeah, it's just like, that's what happened. Yeah. This is what we got. And I can enjoy the pretty parts of this movie and some of the, you know, cool moments. And, you know, and some people maybe not as much, and we can kind of like take what we like, and I'm not going to watch this movie again soon. Yeah. You know?
I will certainly say this, and I remember I asked you if Luke showing up in Mandalorian would have this effect for you, and I think you said it probably didn't with Last Jedi, and that's fine. Seeing Ahsoka come back, seeing Grogu, seeing the many ways they're I think picking up on the plot lines about the problems with the Jedi that Last Jedi set up makes Rise of Skywalker. Ha! I said the name right. I've not said it wrong. I don't think so. Made this a lot easier to watch because I was able to even more so be like, yeah, this is just a random space opera. Star Wars has not abandoned Rian Johnson's visions. It's being played out in these other things. So I can just not even enjoy, but I can at least, tolerate and have fun with the fun scenes in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you might think that. I just can't watch.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
That's fine. It's
like
fine.
I said, I
just
get
won't.
that that's
It's
not
okay.
the case.
That's why I didn't want to be on the podcast of it, though,
Yeah.
because I was like, you know what, I don't have a lot good to say about it. So, like, y'all do an episode about the things you liked and some of the things you didn't like, and like when Rise of Skywalker comes around, like I'll say some of those things because they inform kind of how I enjoyed this movie in a way that I might not have if I really loved The Last Jedi, because it is definitely incongruous.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it was. I just think it's funny. You were like, it was you didn't like it so much that it didn't really matter what Rise of Skywalker was like because you went in with just zero expectations.
Yeah, it was, if I ever watch, like, the new Dexter, which I don't plan to, but if I do, it'll be, like, whatever. It'll be what it is, because for me, that shit ended after, like, season 3 or 4. Season 3. After season 3. That's the end of Dexter for me.
Yeah,
First 3 seasons, brilliant, and then from there, just, like, kind of steadily, okay, no thanks.
I mean, I think it's not coincidence that, like, Luke is your favorite character from the original movies, Han Solo is my favorite, and I'm not going to be on the Han Solo podcast, probably for the exact same reasons, because
yeah, absolutely,
that's one that I can't find any positive in it. And it's like, I think it's entirely possible that if that was a totally random space heist movie, it'd be a great movie. Like, there's a lot of things I didn't like about it.
Or at least fine.
Yeah, like, I mean, Donald Glover Jr. as Lando Calrissian is, I think, the sexiest man to ever appear on Star Wars, and also just a fantastic performance.
He's
But I
great
still
in
hate that
role.
movie so much.
I didn't mind Daenerys Targaryen in there either. She was fine.
Yeah. And also bring it back, though, in terms of acting,
sure.
I will say, I think you're right, Paul, that there's so much that it's hard to say who went wrong with this. And there are things like in the Clone Wars, for example, like we always mock all the various romance lines that Anakin says. And I think Hayden Christensen's a very bad actor, but it's possible that he was just badly directed or it was just a horrible script. It was clearly a horrible script. It's hard to kind of know. I don't have any of that feeling with this. I don't know if it's bad dialogue or bad writing or bad story, but I do think that all the major actors, but especially, probably this is all of it, but like Rey, Finn, Poe, I thought all of them gave very solid acting performances, even if the direction their character went, I was frustrated with, but it had nothing to do with the acting of the characters, of the actors.
Right.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I mean, I think from like a technical perspective, I feel like the writing is better in this than in the prequel trilogy. I just think George Lucas doesn't write very good dialogue.
Yeah.
No, he does not.
And like comes up with really good stories, and then when he handed them off more in the original trilogy, I think, Lawrence Kasdan and whoever else, I can't remember off the top of my head, but just did a little better with the actual writing dialogue, and you get a little improvisation from Harrison Ford, and you get a memorable line.
Yeah, I think it's very true.
I know.
All right, I think that's probably.
I know.
What'd you say?
Did Paul say I know?
I said I know.
I know.
Yeah.
All right, I think it's probably a good place to start wrapping up. Any other kind of last big points or questions either of you wanted to bring up?
No, I feel like it's not too difficult of a movie to pick apart. Mm-hmm. It's like they tried to make all these little interesting side stories and this and that, but then they didn't end up going anywhere, so you just kind of ignore them, and then you'd have a pretty flat, normal ending, as long as you just don't think about like, well, that doesn't make sense or this doesn't make sense. If you ignore all that, it's a pretty simple movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like a straight line, kind of enjoyable ride to me, where it's like, okay, let's just see where this goes. And, I enjoyed it, I'd say. Yeah. But, like, don't have a lot of, like, really big feelings about it. A lot of thoughts, clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not a bunch of big feelings. And, yeah. I'll have my closing thought be just one line that I enjoyed where Rey was saying to the stormtroopers, like, it's fine that we're here. And they're like, oh, it's fine that we're here. And I think
Poe
Poe says it to Finn. That's what I have written down. Like, does she do that to us?
Yeah.
Which I appreciated. Because, like, yeah, if you're around someone with mind control powers, like, it's reasonable to wonder whether they have used them on you in the past, you know, and whether you would remember.
Especially because
remember.
Poe has grown up hearing all the legends and stories of the great Jedi Knight, Luke Skywalker, who won the first war. But probably like, Luke was gone by the time he was a kid, certainly by the time he joined the rebellion. And I think, yeah, it makes sense that Poe didn't live any of that. He doesn't have that experience. And so this Rey is probably the first, Leia is to some extent kind of reclaiming her Force powers, but I don't think she was using them much around him or anything like that. So, yeah.
Right.
I think for me, the kind of ways I can wrap it up is actually going back to Ashley, you and the guys from the MCU cast recently did a podcast on the best villains. And there's a thread that's been started about it on the Facebook group where I think people are kind of making some pretty off-the-wall assertions about that there is kind of one definition of like what is the best villain or something like that. And I think it's an inherently subjective term. And I think for me, this movie as well as this conversation is really helping me clarify that, because I feel like Star Wars especially, more so maybe than any other series, is one where I can very clearly distinguish what I think is the objective best and worst and what are my overall favorites and least favorites. Because I think from an objective movie-making standpoint, this is absolutely not the worst. The dialogue is believable and fairly decent. The plot is utterly off-the-wall bonkers, but no worse than any Fast and Furious movie or like, or at least the last bunch of Fast and Furious movies or any other of it's no worse than a James Bond movie or anything like that. And like a lot of the romance stuff, I mean, it's all just tropes, and it's tropes that like, these movies, and the acting is really good and the fight scenes are pretty good in ways that I feel like, Attack of the Clones to me especially, but you can label one or two of the others, are just objectively worse in so many other ways. In the same way that, like, I don't think Last Jedi is the objectively best. I think Last Jedi has some plotting problems. I think the Canto Bight scene is just incredibly heavy-handed, and that there's some other plot holes that needed to be filled in. But it's probably my favorite. I think Rogue One is the best, with Last Jedi being my favorite and Empire Strikes Back being like the best fusion of the two. And I think for me, of the Skywalker movies, I'm not even going to count Solo because it's I like the Star Wars Holiday Special more than I like Solo. But I think for me though, this is far and away my least favorite because it is, and it's the one that I don't want to say I was like angry, like, it is still at the end of the day just a movie, but like I was very upset. I don't even say very upset. I was, as much as you can get over a movie of a sort, like, I was really unhappy coming out of Rise of Skywalker in a way that very often, like, I went to go see World of Warcraft, which makes Attack of the Clones look like cinematic gold. I mean, it's just,
I was gonna say,
appallingly bad movie. And I laughed at it the whole time because I wasn't invested in any way. And I think I just, as a fan for whom these stories have been a part of my life for 40 years, it just broke my heart in that kind of a way. And, it's, to me, I think, like, you say those words, and I'm so hesitant about them because I think immediately what that makes people think is, like, oh, toxic fan, like, no, I never emailed, J.J. Abrams or any of those people. I didn't even go online and, like, rant about it, except in, like, our own friend groups and stuff. And I think it's okay to be brokenhearted about the things you really love turning out in very different ways without being toxic about it. So yeah,
I agree.
I think that's where I want it being, of like, I don't think it's objectively the worst. I think objectively it's not terrible, but I just think in terms of my own personal feelings, it's absolutely my least favorite.
I mean, I feel like you're kind of raining on my schadenfreude here. But...
I'm sorry.
And I appreciate that. You were kind of stepping away from words like anger and upset, I think, because it's so easy to kind of connect those to the toxicity of, like, it's not the anger about a piece of fiction that's the problem. You know, it's not getting upset, in my view, you know, it's not getting upset that a story doesn't do what you want it to. That's the problem. It's as a result of that anger and upsetness, being abusive towards other people, right? Mm. Which you're clearly not doing. You wouldn't do that, right? And
I deleted the few
like
tweets.
People, right? I mean, you know, but like it's like I think it's fine and healthy to express like I really didn't like this thing. It made me angry. Like the end of Dexter made me angry. Like I felt like the story betrayed the characters, and I also just thought it was like stupid and not very thoughtful and not particularly courageous, but like probably thought it was being kind of edgy. Mm-hmm. But like I didn't email the creators about it, you know, like, whatever. They're moving on. They're going to do their next thing. And, like, I don't really like criticizing things too much. Like, if there isn't anything I like about it, unless it's, like, criticizing, like, hey, I think this is actually harmful because it's painting, you know, a very damaging stereotype, stuff like that, right? But I think, like, expressing, you know, like, what you just did, basically, but even possibly stronger, but just, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, the same way I think, you know, me expressing like that I really didn't like the Last Jedi. To me, it felt like it betrayed a character that I love. Yeah. But, you know, I'm not going to like I'm going to say that on a podcast, but I'm not going to like make it my life's mission to make Rian Johnson miserable. Like, whatever, you know, like, and, you know, so I think it's like, you know, we can... much like Rey can, like, you know, tap into some of the dark side energy. Thank you. Like, we can recognize that we have these emotions, like these emotions, these feelings, these reactions to fiction, they're valid, right? And generally, the things that upset me are things that I really care about. Yeah. Right? If there's something I really don't care about, it's like, whatever, you could do whatever you want, and, like, I probably won't watch it, but, like, I'll start watching it and be like, whatever, and I'll be done with it. But it's like, you care so much about the Star Wars universe, and The Last Jedi really spoke to you, and in an important way, and the fact that this movie went in such a different direction, I think it's unfortunate that we didn't get one cohesive trilogy that, you know, stood on its own. You know, it too much, I think it was playing off of what went before, but couldn't decide whether it wanted to play into that or kind of play away from it, you know, like kind of subvert expectations or pay off expectations. And at the end, I doubt anybody felt super satisfied, except for, you know, I'm sure there's some people who just don't care so much about some of the stuff we care about, and they're like, you know, all the movies have like pretty lightsaber fights and like some good action, and, you know, if that's the main thing you want, you know, like, cool, you know, there's nothing wrong with that.
We have a good friend from high school who liked Attack of the Clones. I remember you and I just looking in bafflement as he described it. But
yep, that was one of the people I was thinking of in my mind right now when I was thinking, like, they probably like all the Star Wars movies, and that's fine. Like, you know, I would like to like them all, but I don't, and that's fine too.
I feel like that's why I like all of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. yeah. I mean, you're the other person I was thinking of.
I'm really easy to just get, you know, I'm like, okay, that's really dumb. Like, I can't watch the first one, but then the Phantom Menace has that amazing fight scene at the end. So I will sit through that whole dumb movie for it just to get to that scene for 15 minutes to be like, oh, yeah, I love this. I love this shit.
Yeah. Yeah, just watch that scene. Like, don't listen to all the racist stereotypes or, you know, whatever in the earlier parts.
No, I actually think I love the fact that you both said that, because I think, Paul, everything you said is correct. And you're right. I think I'm shying away from it because I don't want to be associated with the toxicity. And because it's one more reason I hate the toxicity is I feel like it's made it not okay to passionately care about things like this. Because, I mean, these movies are things I watched since I was like, I do not remember a time when I had not watched Star Wars. Like, it is just something that's always been a part of my life since the first time I don't know, you know, the first time that the entity that was me was in some way present when the movie was playing was my mother went to see it when she was pregnant with me. Like, it's been like that forever. Mm-hmm. But I also think that part of what you both just said, but especially what you said, is the other part of it. It's not just the I don't want to be seen as toxic. It's that one direction of that is I sometimes feel like the fans who say those things, there's a very entitled nature to it of, I have loved this character for 40 years, and so you, Mr. Director and Writer, it is your job to cater to me and my desire to see these movies go in the ways that they want them to go. I can be disappointed that the prequels didn't tell the story that I thought they were going to tell based on the original movies, and that they told some parts I thought quite badly. I can be disappointed, and so can you, with how Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker turned out, but I don't think that in any way negates the millions of fans who didn't care about any of that stuff and loved these movies, or who thought that this was the greatest statement about the Jedi that you could ever make in terms of how Rey wound up. And well, that's fair too.
Sorry.
But I think that's the important part, is that I think I'm glad that we can kind of reclaim that space of being able to say, like, yeah, this meant a lot to me and I felt betrayed and upset, but that doesn't mean they have to be toxic. But even more importantly, I'm never going to tell someone else that they're wrong for liking this movie. If they're close with me and I have that kind of relationship, I might make fun of them a little bit for it. But I'm never going to tell a random person on the internet, like, you're wrong for liking that movie. Or even worse, you're not a true Star Wars fan for liking that movie.
Right.
And I appreciate Paul. Like, again, I wouldn't expect you to ever do it. I know you're never the person who would say, like, oh, you don't understand Luke Skywalker the way I do if you liked Last Jedi or anything like that. I think it's the same thing here. Like, these movies mean a lot to me. I wanted something particular out of them. This is not it by any means. I think it's okay for those of us who didn't like it to get upset about that. And I think it's okay for those who liked it to like it. And that can be because you love the deep philosophy, or because, like, space battles are fun to watch and lightsabers are fun to watch, and, like, cool wisecracking lines are great. And Billy D. Williams is amazing. It was so good to see him come back.
Oh, yeah.
With his, like, 3 on your left moments, basically.
Yes. Like, it's funny, I didn't even get to it, but
Will Freeland.
one of the moments I hated most, because again, it felt like such a rejection of Last Jedi, was Last Jedi put out the call, like, everyone, you gotta come with us. No one came. Here, it felt like nothing had changed. They just did it again, but this time, it's not a fleet. It's just a bunch of people with ships. Yeah. I hated that moment because of how much it, like, made no sense with Last Jedi. But it was also a beautiful, wonderful moment, and Billy D. Williams sold the hell out of it. And
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, they didn't have Lando, right? You need Lando.
Yeah, you gotta have Lando.
You need Lando to get things done.
I know it's not fully...
And to catch you if you're falling off Star Destroyer, and to get you out of a festival in the desert where you're being hunted by stormtroopers.
I know they haven't confirmed it yet, but if the Lando series that's being talked about is going to be with Donald Glover playing young Lando while Billy D. Williams narrates, that would be just so perfect for me.
That'd be cool.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Now, and are we supposed to think that stormtrooper's his daughter?
I have such strong feelings about this.
She's not assumed.
Given that there's, like, 3 black people in the Star Wars universe.
So, yeah, right? Like, I was like, what? I got that they were insinuating that, and then I was just like, but why? Okay, whatever.
I feel like I hated that they did it that way without drawing a stronger connection, because again, like Paul, you said, it's like, oh, well, you're black, I'm black, there's so few of us in this universe, maybe Finn's your brother, who knows. But on the other side, Billy D. Williams is just such I think he could read the phone book and it would come off flirtatiously. Like, that's just his energy.
Yes, that too.
And so to have him like, oh, hey, young attractive woman, let's you and I go on an adventure together. You kind of need to have a big flashing, he's not hitting on her, we promise line, or else it just comes off creepy.
Yeah.
Which, is again, part of why he's a fantastic actor, but I'm guessing that's why they kind of made that insinuation. I wish they'd either, like, given a little more plot reason for us to think that, or just, like, had the actors, like, connect in a way that didn't come off as potentially flirtatious.
Yeah.
Is it that problematic if they're flirtatious?
No.
Necessarily?
Maybe she's into older dudes.
I've gotten the long exhale.
I don't know if it would be necessarily problematic. I think, again, if you developed it for quite a while, it would really work. I think if it's Lando wandering over to the attractive woman he hasn't met before because he's doing with her exactly what he did with Leia 30 years ago, and then this person's the same age that Leia was then, I think all of that is where it's just like, this just feels a little creepy. I think they could have made it a connection that could have maybe even leaned romantic you'd have to kind of jump through some hoops, but I think they could have made that in a way that didn't come off as too problematic. But with as little time,
but they clearly didn't put the work in.
What'd you say?
They clearly didn't put the work in.
Yeah, I think that's which.
Okay.
I mean, I think that could just be the subtitle of this episode, right? Like,
they didn't put the work in.
I think that's it.
All right.
I think that's where we end it.
Perfect.
Well, all three of us are putting the work in on a number of awesome projects.
Yeah.
Although I'm not putting much work on segues apparently. But Ashley, what are you doing these days?
We have at the MCU Cast Extended Loki Day is what I'm pretty much calling it, where we do the live watch of Loki. I believe I'm going to go Eastern, so that starts at 6 p.m. Eastern. A live cast 7 p.m. Eastern on Twitch, and then right into trivia.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been really enjoying your guys' discussions about that, and trivia's a really fun night as well. Definitely check all that out. That's on twitch.tv, Stranded Panda. And for the live watch, you can find the information of that if you join the Stranded Panda chat group on Facebook or go to the website. You'll get all that kind of information. Paul, what are you doing these days?
I am streaming on Twitch myself at 1 p.m. Eastern every morning because it's 10 a.m. Eastern here, Western Pacific. Yeah, this is not going well.
Wow. You sound like me.
Yeah. I gotta go somewhere soon. But yeah, twitch.tv/ZenMadman is where I can be found, and I only need a handful more followers to gloriously reach affiliate status on Twitch. And then, I don't know, maybe I'll talk about some of this stuff on there sometime if people have interest in that.
Yeah, well, and just completing the trifecta, I'm also now doing a bunch of stuff on twitch.tv. All my stuff is under the Ethical Panda, and it's very connected to what Paul's doing. I'm also doing a poker stream, but Paul is quite an expert. I'm decent. I'm trying to get a lot better with Paul as my mentor and tutor. But my podcast is I'm going to be playing poker, and every now and then I'll talk to you a little bit about poker. Not as an expert, but someone who knows a good deal, but also very open to your suggestions and comments. But mostly I'm going to talk about issues like this. Like I did a stream earlier, as Paul said, where I talked about The Last Jedi. I did one on queer representation and thing in media. The most recent one I did was on time travel and Loki, and how I was concerned that the TV show Loki was going to do some of the like time stream logic stuff that never makes sense to me. Thank God they're not doing that. No one's arguing about that on MCU casts or anything. Very proud of the fact.
No, we didn't fight at all this
Very
week.
proud of the fact that the Stranded Panda group has been very deep in arguments, and I had nothing to do with it. Like schadenfreude up the wazoo. But yeah, like Paul, I would love to get more followers. More followers can help me also kind of get to the point where you can bring in a little bit of money to help pay for all this stuff. Paul and I have done some collaborations where he's come on my podcast to talk to me about those issues as well as talk to me about poker. We're going to do a lot more of that kind of stuff. So please drop a follow to all three of those Twitch channels, Stranded Panda TV. Or actually, is it Stranded Panda TV or is it Stranded Panda?
TV.
Okay. Yeah, so
Stranded.
Yeah.
go to twitch.tv, search for Stranded Panda
Slash.
TV.
Yeah, that's a slash in there.
Right, yeah, but if you just go to twitch.tv and then type into the search, that'll work too. But yeah, Stranded Panda.
And you can follow for free, but them you can actually give money to by subscribing.
Yes. And you can search for Stranded Panda TV or The Ethical Panda or Zen Madman. That's how you get all three of us. Definitely check all those out. If you can follow, you can even follow and then turn on notifications. Just turn off notifications just so that we can help boost up our numbers. Great way to support all.
It is helpful.
Say again?
I said it is helpful.
Yes. Great way to support all the things that's going on there. And then, of course, you can find if you've got thoughts on this podcast, we'd love to hear them. Love to know, did you love this movie? Did you hate it? What did you think? You can find all the feedback is just by going to The Ethical Panda. You can search for Ethical Panda on Facebook, on Twitter. Email us at theethicalpanda@gmail.com or just go to theethicalpanda.com for the website. And, of course, this podcast is a proud member of the Stranded Panda podcast community. That's where the MCU cast that Ashley is on, you're basically a host at this point, is on all the time. There's also great podcasts about, I do one on ethical questions in this kind of media that Paul and Ashley have both been on a bunch called Superhero Ethics. There's other great podcasts about Star Trek and about all kind of other like universes. There's lots of great stuff on there. Check it out, strandedpanda.com. So I'm having myself, Ashley, Paul, Oh, and I should say, my Twitch channel, I'm trying to establish a schedule. It is generally going to be Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 p.m. my time. At the moment, it is Sunday night at 9:37 p.m. So this night, I'm going to be a few minutes late, but I'm probably going to hang up with you all, get some water, and then go right on stream. So check it out. Check out the other two podcasts. Check out the other two streams. Check out all of our podcasts. Check it all out. And most importantly, this is a terrible movie. But have a great day.
Hey!
I don't know, like, may the force be... Oh, were you trying to do Babu Frick or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey!